Hello and welcome to the Empress podcast. I am your host, Jessica, known in the online space as Jess the Empress. I started this podcast to help you be present with yourself, cope with chaos, and simplify your life. I do this by combining psychology, behavioral science, and the tarot. I have a background in mental health, specifically a master's in clinical social work from USC, and I'm a professional tarot reader. So get ready to have a nurturing, creative, and empowering experience with me as we use practical magic. Hey, hi, hello. Welcome back to the pod. It's your girl, Jess. I'm so happy that you're here today. Welcome to May. This is the May Collective Tarot reading. I am looking forward to getting into this with you. But before I tell you the card, I want to tell you about the card. And maybe those of you who read tarot can kind of guess. We'll see. Let's play a game. All right. So if I'm describing the card, have you ever noticed how some people seem to really bounce back from setbacks, but other people kind of get stuck from that same setback? Have you ever noticed how some people are really hopeful and they bring a lot of ease and joy into experiences, even when things are hard, you know? This is what we're talking about today. And it has a lot to do with optimism, but it's not a fake optimism, okay? It's not this optimism that's forced and performative. It's real deal optimism, and it can change your life. I think as we journey into using optimism, we're going to learn some things from this card. Okay, the card reveal is the Page of Wands. If you guessed it, good for you. If not, that's okay. This is a new game we're playing, so maybe I have to get better at describing cards. We'll see. But I want to talk about the real purpose of positivity in our lives and optimism in our lives. There is a thing that's called positive psychology, but it's like a lot of things in the mental health and self-development, spiritual development spaces. There's a way to use it where it will help us, and there's a way to use it where it becomes actually a problem. So we're going to get into some of that too. But I've been working with people for a really long time that, they've lost their spark. And losing their spark, I'm going to say this, it has nothing to do with them doing it on purpose. They didn't make an active choice to lose their spark. A lot of times they just got lost in the sauce of a system, of a lot of changes. Life happens to all of us, and so life happens to these people and they're okay, I'm not feeling positive like I used to, or I'm just not feeling excited about anything like I used to. And if you're feeling that way right now, I want to just validate, yeah, life gets heavy. Life is real. Life is serious. And when that happens, if we don't have the skill set of choosing optimism or choosing positivity, we can very much think well, why should I get excited? Or there's nothing to look forward to. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about getting your spark back with optimism. And this is not by ignoring reality. So that's a way to have false optimism. You don't look at the problems. You don't look at the very real issues. And instead you're everything's fine. Everything is working out for me every single time. It's a lot of new age jargon, honestly. But that's actually bypassing reality, because if we look around and if we really look, if we use all of our senses to take in the way that reality is constructed and all the things that are happening within these systems to people that we love and care about, or even people that we don't know, we can very clearly see that there's a lot of imbalance, there's a lot of injustice, and there's a lot of problems. And there's a lot of pain and a lot of suffering too. And we don't want to ignore that. But we have to approach the reality differently, right? So it's not about, again, being falsely optimistic about everything, but it's also not saying that there's no room for optimism. Again, balance is key. We're going to find that middle road. The truth is that, optimism is not just a fluffy feeling. It's a practical skill that affects everything from your health to your relationships. It can even impact how long you live. And the cool thing is you can learn it. And that's very much what the Page of Wands represents. Pages themselves, anytime we get a page in the tarot, that represents education. It represents learning and going and doing and like finding more about something, finding out more about something. And so pages are great. They're also pretty practical. And what I mean in that practicality is they show up step by step to do things. So there might be, yeah, a level of enthusiasm they bring and they're kind of bouncing around, but there's still a level of like structure and organization that they have in obtaining that new skill or in learning that new thing. And the reason why they have that approach is because it is a page. Some of the sort of less organized approaches happen in the 1 through 10. When we get a page in the tarot, it means like we've been through the journey of the 1 to 10. And so we've learned some things, you know, we kind of know how to organize our time best or how to structure our time best. And so I feel like the card for the month of May is like, you're going to be taking these appropriate and measured steps to bringing optimism into your life in a way that makes sense for you. For all of us here, what rings true is also the that's not the right word, the individuality of the page, because this represents like the uniqueness of your journey. Not to say that somebody else can't have a great program, because I mean, I have some, you know, but what I'm talking about is more of like, there's no one that can, I don't think, give you a very specific formula for what's going to make you happy, for what's going to spark that in you, and like reignite your sense of balance in a world that there's a lot of stuff going on, you know, a lot of bad stuff going on. But let's talk about what optimism is and what it isn't. So optimism, again, it's not about slapping a smiley face on everything and pretending that problems don't exist. That's denial, okay? And that doesn't work. Real optimism is about how you explain what happens to you. And when something goes wrong, do you see it as a permanent thing or a temporary thing? Do you see it as personal or do you see it as non-personal? Do you see it as pervasive or do you see it as specific? Let me give you an example. Let's say that you mess up a presentation at work. A pessimistic view would be like, I'm terrible at public speaking, which is a permanent statement. It's just who I am, making it personal. And then saying something like, I'll probably fail at the client meeting in a week or two. And that's like pervasive. An optimistic view might sound something like this. That presentation didn't go as I planned. Temporary. I didn't prepare enough for those specific questions. Not entirely personal. And then my one-on-one client meetings will still go great. Specific. So I think it's important to just compare those two things and maybe reflect on which one do you often sound like when, you know, you make a mistake, which we all make a mistake. So probably won't be hard for you to tap into that space later today, you know, later this week. But it's the same situation because both people didn't do well in that meeting. Okay. But how they look at what happened makes the biggest difference in their lives. And here's what fascinates me about optimism. Again, it's not about ignoring the negative. Like the person said, I wasn't, you know, well prepared for those questions. And so they're kind of saying like, yep, there's more that I can do here. I can improve for sure. But they're not beating themselves up about it and they're not making it a bigger deal than it really needs to be. They're using it as a learning opportunity. But our brains have a negative bias. You know, we're wired to spot threats and problems. So we have to give ourselves equal positivity in our life. Do you know what I mean? Like, because our brain just naturally navigates towards the negative, we have to intentionally put in the positive because that's just not the brain's default structure. It doesn't go to the positive automatically. So an optimistic person, they just want to make sure that they notice what's going really well. They want to know what's improving and they want to know what's possible. So anytime you're in that space, you're very much the Page of Wands. The Page of Wands is like, yeah, I know that there's problems, but I'm going to figure out how to solve them. Or if I can't solve them, I'm going to at least figure out the next thing and next best thing that I can do for myself or those other people that are around me. Okay, so we're going to get into the psychology of optimism, and I'm going to add the links to all the research and stuff in the show notes so you can click on those and read through it in your own time. I might actually put it in a Google Doc, whatever. You'll see it in the show notes. Whatever I choose, you'll see it in the show notes. But let's get into it. Okay, so the psychology of optimism. Research on optimism, it shows that optimism tends to help people live longer, recover faster from illness and surgery, have stronger immune systems, experience less stress, build more supportive relationships, have more money over the course of their lifetime, and show greater resilience during tough times. Multiple studies have also linked optimism to increased longevity. And so why do they think that this is? And there's a few reasons. First, optimism reduces stress hormones like cortisol that if cortisol is chronically elevated, it wreaks havoc on your brain and heart connection and really your whole body. But when you have reduced that stress hormone, you're just generally feeling better. So that's, a thumbs up. That's a win. Second is that optimistic people tend to take better care of themselves because they believe that they matter and they believe that their actions matter. And so that belief and their actions, those match up to just helping themselves out, really just taking better care of themselves. And then the third thing is that they persevere longer because they believe that things can improve. And here's another way that we can spin optimism. Optimism creates possibility. When you believe something positive is possible, then you start noticing opportunities that you would have otherwise missed. Your brain literally filters reality differently. And that's why the skill set of being optimistic is so important. The Page of Wands is by its own choices an optimistic person. It doesn't mean that they don't face challenges like we've talked about. So when you pull the Page of Wands or you pull this for a client, you might recognize that this person is being really optimistic about whatever they're asking about, or you're having an idealistic sometimes, but mostly optimistic outlook. And again, I think that that's a good thing. We're going to talk about how it can be a problem, but with the Page of Wands, again, being in the upright position, May says that, we're, again, increasing the skill set of optimism, but that we're generally showing up to our circumstances and to our relationships with a lot of hope, with a positive outlook. And I think that that's a great place to be. In the book Tarot for Change by Jessica Dorr, she talks about the psychologist James Hillman and his acorn theory in relation to the Page of Wands. And so I thought I would share more about that. What she wrote was insightful, but I also want to expand on it. But if you are interested in her book, I highly recommend it. It's one that I've read, like a dozen times now. But the acorn theory. So Hillman suggests that he has a book he wrote called The Soul's Code. In that book, he suggests that each of us have a very unique calling or a unique purpose. And that's similar to how an acorn contains all the coding inside of it for it to become an oak tree. So we know we want to become someone, right? But we just may not know who that version of ourselves is. We know that we want to become someone. Now, let me be clear. That doesn't have to be someone famous. It just means you want to have your own identity. You want to become someone. It is the very human experience to express your personality, to develop your personality, to know who you are. I think it's a beautiful thing. So that desire is in each and every single one of us. So a lot like the oak tree, its pattern is inside the acorn. Our potential is inside of us when we're born to become, the best version of ourselves. Okay, so because that lives within us, let's go back to the oak tree acorn situation so you can get a full picture. But, that acorn has to have the right conditions in order to flourish into the most beautiful oak tree ever, the best version of an oak tree. It has to have the right conditions. And this doesn't even just mean just water and sunlight. It also is soil and maintenance and all of those things. We have to have the right conditions to know who we are. We have to have the right conditions to discover what matters to us. So with the conditions, let's talk about the mindset conditions. If we're stuck in pessimism all the time, we're essentially just like overlooking our own potential. We're not nurturing our potential. We're not doing anything to help ourselves grow. So optimism is all about creating that fertile condition for our growth. The Page of Wands, again, is such a beautiful representation of this because it's not a king yet. It hasn't like quite grown up. It's still a little bit messy. It's still willing to get dirty, but it all the way through the messy dirtiness of it, there's a level of optimism that stays there. And let's talk about optimism in action. It's story time. Let me tell you about Maria. She came to therapy after losing her job during company layoffs. At first, she was devastated and she was like, no one's going to hire me at my age. I've spent 15 years developing the skill for an industry and nobody wants me here anymore. But over time, Maria shifted her perspective. She started saying things like, I've got 15 years of experience solving problems and that's valuable somewhere. She began networking, not with desperation, but with genuine curiosity about where her skills would fit.
Hey there, coffee lovers. Are you tired of settling for boring coffee? I have a treat for you. Today's episode is brought to you by Heartwork Coffee Bar, your one-stop destination for exceptional coffee experiences. Whether you're a coffee connoisseur or just someone who appreciates a great cup of joe, Heartwork Coffee Bar is here to elevate your coffee game to new heights. At Heartwork Coffee Bar, they take pride in their craft because each batch is carefully roasted to perfection, ensuring that every sip is a symphony of flavor. From the rich and the robust to the light and fruity, they have a coffee blend for every palate. And here's the best part. For you amazing podcast listeners, Heartwork Coffee Bar is offering an exclusive 10% discount on your purchase. Just use the code Empress10 at checkout and you'll save big on your order. Why settle for ordinary when you can indulge in the extraordinary coffee from Heartwork Coffee Bar? Remember to use code Empress10 for that special 10% discount and treat yourself to the coffee experience that you deserve. Don't miss out on this fantastic offer. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thanks to Heartwork Coffee Bar for making today's episode possible. Now go grab your favorite mug, brew a fresh cup, and enjoy the podcast with the perfect companion, Heartwork Coffee Bar. Cheers.
After some time, let's say, 6 months, Maria started a consulting business using her industry knowledge to help smaller companies. That is an example of optimism in action, not denying, the difficulty of the job loss, but refusing to see that job loss as the end of her story. Let's use another example. Let's take James. He received a health diagnosis in his 40s, and he was thinking, my life is over. How can I make the most of whatever time that I have? And then he decided to prioritize his relationships, start writing a book that he always wanted to write. And then he actually found himself enjoying life more deeply than before his diagnosis. Let's say that, he went back to the doctor and his health hadn't declined. And over time, he was able to manage his symptoms. Was that totally optimism? No. I mean, his treatment obviously played a huge role, like his treatment plan and his doctor. But let me tell you what his optimism did do, okay? Optimism helped him talk to his doctor about medical advice, maintain social connections with people around him, and find himself making meaning in the difficulty, right? So maybe that was something that, helped him not decline. All those factors we know impact your health for the positive. So again, just a story, but one I think is probably more close to home, than some story of like, he miraculously got better. No, I think sometimes optimism can play a role even in our health, even if things don't immediately get better or get better at all. Optimism is still really, really important. But now let's talk about when optimism goes wrong. And for those of you who read cards, this could be the Page of Wands in the reverse position, and something to really, get into a little further with yourself or with your client, really explore that. And let's get into it. Let's talk about Alex, okay? Alex considered himself a realist. which meant that he usually focused on everything that would go wrong. When he had a business idea, he would immediately think of all the ways that it would fail. And when he met someone interesting, he would focus on all the reasons that the relationship wouldn't work out. So this person was like nitpicking flaws. What's very interesting about some of this strategy is it's not all wrong. I think that it's a good idea, actually, when you're about to take a big risk, to write down all the ways that it could fail. But you have to do more than just that. Like I said, you can't stay in that pessimistic state. Yeah, your brain goes to the negative. Alex's brain goes to the negative, writes all that stuff down. So then you have to have some positives that come out of it. That's where he didn't do the right thing, though. He just stayed in that pessimistic, worst case scenario place. But Alex never really saw himself as negative. He saw himself as very smart, very careful, and protecting himself from disappointment. But that's actually where he goes wrong, because it's the protection that really becomes a prison. He never took chances, he never put himself out there, and he never discovered what might have been possible. Because he stayed in that zone of protection, there was no, again, healthy evaluation of what's the risk and how can I maybe prevent the worst case scenario from happening. And I'm sure you've heard people say this, or maybe you even have thought this. I feel like I'm watching my life from the sidelines. His fear of failure had guaranteed a different kind of failure, the failure to try. This shows the danger of extreme pessimism. But there's also risk with unbalanced optimism, when it becomes magical thinking or denial. Again, Page of Wands in the reverse position can be that the individual is so pessimistic that they don't want to believe in the good, or that they are a little bit delulu and they're in some denial / magical thinking. Research shows that optimism doesn't always lead to positive outcomes in all circumstances, particularly during difficult, complex stressors. An overly, keyword being overly, an overly optimistic outlook can sometimes lead to disappointment when that optimistic perspective, that outlook, it doesn't materialize. That can have a huge emotional and mental impact on people that actually puts them in a downward slope. And I see this a lot actually in the spiritual space. When the Page of Wands comes up, it can be where a person is just thinking that this problem will solve itself, when you and everyone you know around this person can see that it's so evident that this problem will not solve itself. And this can be around huge issues like health. It can be about abuse. It can be about finances, a myriad of things. People will think this will just magically resolve itself. And we have to have more than just blind positivity when it comes to the very serious and real issues that so many of us face. I hate to see so many people falling into this space of blind optimism and magical thinking. I also want to say, like, I've been guilty of magical thinking too, again, because it's just something that our brains do. So I think most of us can say we've been guilty of magical thinking and just kind of wishing like, oh, I hope it solves itself, oh, if I don't do anything, then it'll be fine, that type of stuff. We got to watch out for that. Anytime we're in that space, it just means we're not actually living in our power. And in order to step into our power, that means we need to consider what else is possible. We have to find a way through things while admitting things suck, while admitting we hate it, while admitting things are hard. It's those two things at the same time that the Page of Wands holds really well. The wand itself is a fire energy. It is creativity, and it's your life force energy. And so you have this spark within you, and maybe it's really, really, really hard to ignite it. God, I've been in the throes of depression so many times, and every single time I never feel like I'll get out of it. I always think, oh my God, this is the worst. But in some ways, like, I do focus on this is just temporary. And I don't always believe that in the moments that I'm saying it to myself, and that's okay. But I've also been through it enough times to know that I do make it out every single time. And I do get back in touch with that spark. And there's something so important about that fire energy that lives in every single one of us. In the world where things are not that great, it can just extinguish that fire so fast. And I think because of that, we fall into that magical thinking of like, I don't have the power to change this. There's no point in even trying. And in some ways, like that's actually really pessimistic, right? Because we don't think that we're capable. And the Page of Wands believes in its capacity to make a difference. Otherwise, why would it be doing all of the things that it's doing? There's again a deeper motivation and sense of purpose that grounds the page into its day to day action. And I want to talk about that day to day action right now, right? Having a real balanced, reality based level of optimism. So, the three things that you can start today are the possibility journal. So, or like piece of paper, whatever you want, but just write down a couple of good things that have happened over the last week. Sometimes when I do this exercise with my clients, I've actually had to learn that we can look back in our history and we can find the positive events. Sometimes we go a little while and we don't have anything really positive to talk about, and that's okay. So there's no shame if you're kind of looking back over the last week or two and you're like, ew, it's all bad. I fully honor that. I fully hear what you're saying. So just then reflect on maybe like a couple of other positive things that have ever happened. They don't have to be big. They can be as small as, I actually had a really good cup of coffee this morning and I'm so grateful for that. Or it's like, yeah, 3 months ago, I had a really good chat with my neighbor and I feel happy. I'm so glad that I know them a little bit more. But the whole point of it is you want to write down why these good things happened and what you're taking from them moving forward. So in that neighborly chat, you got a sense of goodness in other people. You got a sense of connection. That's still out there in the world. Even if you might not be able to get out there in the world right now because of your circumstances and because life is hard, those things are ready for you when you're ready. Okay, so no pressure, no rush. Just know that they're there because that's the possibility. That's the whole point of the journal entry. This trains your brain to look for positive patterns and, again, possibilities rather than problems, threats, doom scenarios. You have to repeat this. This is a little homework, okay? But do it for like a couple of weeks and just notice how you feel. And notice what is changing to see if maybe some of your interactions or your mental landscape has shifted into the positive over the next couple of months. Keep up the journal entry as much as you need to, obviously. Another thing, and I'm working on this, but this is the language shift. This is where you are noticing when you use absolute language. And what are absolute terms? Okay, they're always, never, and everyone or no one. Everyone hates me. So that would be absolute. I always mess up. Again, that would be absolute. Kind of going back to what we talked about in the very, very beginning, the language and how we frame things is important. It can tell us a lot about ourselves, and we can also notice that it happens in other people, and that can give us some insight into maybe where they're at, mentally at that moment that we're engaging with them. Like, oh, they might be feeling actually a little bit pessimistic or overwhelmed about things. So when you're noticing this, you want to shift it. You want to make these words less permanent and less pervasive than they actually are. So when you're saying to yourself, I always mess up, you can say, you know what, I did struggle with this today, or I'm struggling with this right now. Okay, so today and right now, that's not forever. See how that changed it a little bit? Instead of saying, no one appreciates me, you would want to say something like, I'm feeling unappreciated by this specific person in this specific situation. You're not making it about everybody. You're not saying everybody doesn't like me. You're saying, oh, you know what? So-and-so is seriously not taking a look at the efforts that I'm making, and I'm feeling some type of way about that. And so when you do that, you're making the situation a little more manageable emotionally and mentally, and being less overwhelmed is a good thing. You know how to direct your attention to this one person regarding this one particular situation, not walking around thinking that no one is listening to you and nobody cares. And the last thing, and I use this one quite a bit, what can I learn? This is the question you want to ask yourself. What can I learn from this that will help me going forward? Let me be clear that this does not mean that the setback that you're experiencing is a good thing. Okay? Because I think when someone asks us this question, it can be slightly annoying. And I want to give full like awareness to that space. Like I get it. There's been times where someone's like, what can you learn from this? And I'm not ready to take that on yet. I'm like, I don't want to look at the positive. So I'm like, fuck this question. But when you're ready, like I'm gonna tell you this. It doesn't mean that you're pretending that the setback is great. It doesn't mean you love it or you should be happy about it. It just means like the difficulties could have some value in them, valuable information in them rather, to help you grow. So for example, I'll tell you one for me. I was really challenged at work to the point of tears, and it wasn't a bad thing. Like nobody was being mean to me or anything like that. Like that would be crazy. But it was just I was up against a challenge, and I was really struggling, and I was noticing the thoughts that I was telling myself and kind of believing in like what I was capable of. And I noticed that this challenge is really pushing me to a new level that I need to be kind to myself. And, I can't just force myself to get to this new level. I've got to be paying attention to my emotions and caretaking myself as I basically take on more responsibility and figure stuff out. And so that had a lot of valuable information. As painful as it was, I literally lost like nights of sleep. Like it was crazy. But as challenging as that was, as painful as that was, I realized, there's some other signs in here of when I'm not taking care of myself and how I can meet other challenges. And I have since then, how I can meet other challenges with more compassion, with more respect, with more pacing of myself than just like throwing myself in and rushing. So I learned some things. And that's all that this exercise is designed to do. What can I learn that will help me move forward? This is it. Like, because you're talking about forward movement, right? You're not saying like, I'm trying to pull a lesson out of this situation that's like beating me down to the ground. You're saying like, no, I know I'm going to move forward from this. It's just really hard right now. So that's the balance there. But let's wrap up. Let's wrap up the month of May with some closing thoughts. The world is full of possibilities. For some of us, we've always believed in that since we were really little. And for some of us, we're discovering that now. We might not have considered what the possibilities were. We might have walked the path that other people wanted for us. And now our world has changed and we're realizing there's so much more out there. So wherever you are, like feel into those possibilities. I want to talk about something too that's so unique to the Page of Wands. And this is the ability to bounce back. I think the Page of Wands has a quiet level of resilience to it because, in a sense, in terms of the tarot journey, it's made it this far. And so the fact that like you've been disappointed, the fact that you've failed, the fact that you've been through hard stuff and you're still choosing to believe that good things are possible, that your efforts matter, that joy is worth pursuing, that is a level of resilience that is golden and that more people need in this world. I am going to say that. And I think if you pull the Page of Wands and if you take anything away from that, know that that might be where you are right now. You're the person that believes that good things are possible. And I love that. I really do. Remember that little acorn and remember the oak tree. You contain the possibilities that you haven't really discovered yet. Like, think about that. You could decide you want to get into painting and then you can discover like, oh my God, I love this. And not only are you good at painting, but it just generally calms down your mind and it's a win-win. You're good at something and you freaking love it, Optimism is about creating the conditions where possibilities can emerge. So you want to give yourself the right mental conditions, the right emotional conditions, obviously the right physical conditions. And start small. The Page of Wands is not rushing in. The page is one step at a time. So notice one or two good things today. Question those negative assumptions. When you start noticing that, you're going to be blown away at how often you do it. I was always blown away when I really was noticing and I was like, oh my God, I'm negative about everything, but it's okay. But just notice it. Like the first step is noticing and then asking yourself like, okay, I'm really challenged here. What do I need to learn? Like, what is it I literally need to learn? What is the skill, mental, emotional, whatever that I need to learn? Because it's only going to help me be better. Right? It's only going to help me have a smoother time when I face challenges in the future. And it's like every step, it builds on itself, right? You become stronger and better. And then before you know it, you're running, you're transforming your experiences You don't have to be happy about it, things all the time. You don't. You can hate it. And remember that it's not about a feeling state sometimes. Not, optimism doesn't mean you're always feeling good. It means you're deciding that there's a way through this, that there are answers, that there's a solution, and you're capable of figuring it out. Okay, that there's a possibility for this energy to shift and for you to not be stuck. So for May, we're going to nurture our potential, and your potential is absolutely worth your nurturing. All right, I'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much for being here. Bye. I want to ask you to rate and review my podcast. Giving me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts would mean the world to me. I love knowing who's listening and what everyone is getting from the episode, so please take a moment of your time to share your thoughts, and I look forward to reading your reviews soon.